All right. Hey everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the first campaign I ever ran. Um, it was it was a huge learning experience, a massive cluster, and we had a blast. Um, it's going to be a pretty long video, I think. I'm going to do the best by ability to remember it. It's been a long while, and I'm just kind of going off the cuff for the most part. I tried to remember the entire plot line and have mapped it out, so don't worry, there's going to be visuals. It's not going to be just me staring at you the whole time. But it's going to be a little scuffed. And that's also part of the fun. So, before I start into the actual story, I guess the first thing I want to say in terms of this this little venture is, if you want to start running a game, you don't need to have a battle mat or figures or like anything really. All you need is paper, clipboards, and access to the rules, which are out there online for free if you want to get started with the basic stuff. Like with me, I was using a single player's handbook. I was hand making all of my monsters and encounters, and we all played off of our character sheets sitting on a couch. Eventually, I upped our production a little bit more the deeper we got into the hobby, but you know, it's something that you don't need to have the massive investment to get into. You can just dive right in with a group of friends and learn from there. You don't even need to know the rules 100%. I made plenty of mistakes when I started out. So with that said, that one nugget of wisdom I have to share, follow along with my self-indulgent trip down memory lane. So we're just going to switch over. So our story begins in a little town called Ravenredden. I bastardized the Danish language for all of my towns. I just go to Google Translate and type in what the town did, and then translate, for example, Tusengard down here is 1,000 farms. Or Kiered over here, it was a bridge fortress city, and Kiered is bridge. So, translations are fun. You can get that fantasy flavor without trying very hard. Ravenredden, when I started out on this campaign, I didn't have any plans going forward. I kind of created a single session self-contained adventure, and then I built my world out from this single town. So Ravenredden was a crossroads town. That was kind of in the boonies, but because it had two major roads that come through it, it was like a checkpoint town where adventurers would hang out, and it heavily relied on it along with a town guard. So with that said, we start off with our 4 players here. So there was Millie. She was a gnome bard, and she eventually grew to take on the moral compass of the group. You had Az, who was a elven cleric. He was a flirt. He was just in it to have fun and go on an adventure. He had Iris, who was a elven sorceress, and she was a little bit bonkers. And a lot of the wild stuff that happened during the campaign was usually a direct result of her getting a little out of hand. And then you had Aurora, who was a halfling thief. And she was quiet, she liked doing thief things, and that was really it. There wasn't a whole lot more to say. A few sessions in, we had another player join us, and I'll get into that in a moment. So anyway, the four of them start off in a tavern, as you do with campaigns, and each of them was kind of doing their thing. So at the time when I ran this, I was very deep into Skyrim, so I based a lot of it off of Skyrim. You have your fortress cities in the north that are colder, you have your more temperate inland, and then this little town down here, I call it Not Riften. Yeah, so there's a lot of borrowing, I suppose would be the best way to word it. So part of that borrowing was in the background. I had a civil war as a talking point for a lot of NPCs, and I wasn't sure if the party would actually pick up on it. It was more there for flavor, just so that there was some kind of overworld tension to explain why there wasn't more guards and knights and such to defend the people. And the game opens up with Millie. She plays a little song, as is at the bar hitting on the tavern owner. Aurora's sneaking around, she's picking pockets. Iris is watching all this go down, and the party doesn't know each other yet. And what ends up happening is two of the tavern patrons, they get into an argument over the Civil War. The main conflict here being the over in the capital, they have a new king, and people that don't live nearby aren't really prospering, and they don't respect the new king. Whereas to the west, the people have thrown their support behind a military leader who really developed and cared for their region and protects it from threats from the mountain past in the west. In this setting, I had dwarves being their neighbors, and through history, the humans were kind of treated as they experienced a lot of oppression, where basically they break free of they like rise up and overcome one problem, and then immediately get like stomped back down by a different group. So there's a little bit of racial tension there for like non-humans and humans. Dwarves had the second most egregious track record after a race called the Gore, which we'll get into in a bit. Yeah, so you have these tavern patrons. They start fighting each other, like they're just arguing. And during this, Iris decides, hey, I'm gonna sneak up and try to pickpocket one of these guys. She did not have any business trying to pick someone's pocket. She had no bonuses. She just decided she wanted to do it because she saw Aurora doing it. So she fails her check, and one of the patrons turns around and shoves her, which leads to another guy getting involved because he's trying to stand up for her, right? So they start fighting. The guy gets shoved into Millie. Millie gets crushed under it. And a small riot starts breaking out in the inn. And the owner looks to Az and is like, hey, can you do anything to stop this? And he tries using I forget what spell it was, but it could snuff out light. And this is one spot where my understanding of the rules was weak. was spellcasting. I made people roll on everything, which led to some hilarious moments that they probably wouldn't happen nowadays at my table, but we all had fun with it. And what happened was, Az tried to put out the lights using control water or create water. He rolled a 1, so I had it backfire and it knocked him out for a moment. But it did successfully put the lights out. So lights are out, people are fighting and screaming. It's just chaos inside the tavern / inn now. And Aurora takes this opportunity to sneak behind the counter and start stealing from the place. And to quell this chaos, the town guard comes in, and they start trying to arrest people. They're dragging people off, and in this chaos that she created, she decided to up the ante even further. So Iris snatches the lantern off one of the guards' belts, throws it behind the tavern counter, hits the alcohol, causes a big fire. Whole place lights up. Everyone's just running and screaming. Az gets dragged out by the tavern owner. Millie gets dragged out by a guard. Iris gets arrested. Aurora sneaks away, just burnt from the explosion from the fire. So we're 10 minutes into the campaign at this point, and they've already burned down a building. So that was quite the way to start. And this was just supposed to be like their meeting point. And what I had planned was to have zombies attack the village. So I decided to up the ante a little bit. And those bodies that they had accidentally created through burning, they rose up. And now they're fighting fire zombies on top of the zombies that were supposed to attack the town. So the town guard asks any able-bodied people to defend. So they were covering a couple entrances, and then adventuring groups were paired off and covering the other gates. And during this, Iris and her manacles convinces Aurora to free her and pick the locks. And together they started to on the condition that she sticks with them and helps out. So the four of them, they kind of pair up. They along with one other town guard whose name was Sven. So the five of them, they successfully stop the zombie invasion. After a pretty long and brutal fight. I played fast and loose with stat abilities and stuff at the time. It was a lot more cinematically focused. So like one of the zombies, he had his arm broken off, and he used like the bone as like a spear for piercing damage and that kind of thing. So pretty out there, but made for a lot of fun. And so they have like this pretty nasty fight. If memory serves, Millie almost died during it, and Sven bailed her out and saved her. And in the ashes of the fight, they're all talking. It's like a town meeting, and the captain of the guard is like, I know where this is. I know where the guy that did this is. Do you all want to come with me, and we're going to put an end to this tonight? And they're like, yeah. They're like, yeah, we'll reward you. Just come with us, and we're going to go and snuff out this necromancer. So Sven and the party go with the captain of the guard. And they travel through the evening to a cave that's like partially, I'd say like a half a day out from town. They did stop to rest, and during this, some bandits went to ambush them, but Aurora, who was sleeping away from the party and keeping watch, she caught them out, snuck up behind them, and had actually snuck their weapons off them. So when they got to the party to ambush them, they're like, uh-oh, what do we do? And they're kind of caught with their pants down, and the party dealt with them very easily. So they head into the necromancer's cave. They start exploring. They take out zombies. They fight their way in, and then the captain of the guard turns and he shuts like the big cave entrance door and locks it shut, and he kills Sven from behind. Pincering the party. And it's revealed that the captain of the guard had been working with the necromancer to build up like a little necromantic army, and the guy was going to try and take over the town. And the intention was to kill the party and add to his collection of collection of people. So so we had Az and Millie were fighting one-on-one with zombies, Ven, and the town guard, or the captain of the guard. And then you had Iris, who decided she was just going to dash to the back of the cave, like just not fight anything and just make a beeline for the necromancer. And then you had Aurora, who was supporting Millie and Az. So we end up with this really gritty 3 versus 1 against this veteran fighter, where the party came out on top, but just barely. And then deep in the cave, you had utter chaos break out, because Iris had a summoning spell, and I didn't understand how they worked, because it was the first time I'd ever run a game. So I just had her roll, and then I picked something out and said that's what she summoned. Because she didn't really research her spells either. And I had her summon like a demon bear. And the bear mauls the necromancer and kills him. Mauls the zombies, and then it turns to her, and she uses a spell on it to stun it. And then the party catches up and they kill the bear. And then the 4 of them, they go through the necromancer stuff. They find the evidence that the captain of the guard was going to betray the town. Find out that there's an order of necromancers that's active in the region. And Az finds a magic mirror that when he picks it up, it talks to him. And there's a woman's spirit that's trapped inside the mirror, and she's saying, hey, if you bring me to this tower in the northeast, I'll reward you. It'll free my spirit from this thing. So the group talk it over. They don't really have enough to go off of for the necromancer stuff, so they decide they're going to check out the tower. They head back to town. They hand over all the evidence that they have to the village elder. The guy thanks them, gives them a home. Like, he's just like, well, we have some openings now, so here, take one of the cabins, it's yours now. Rewards them with gold and a place to stay, and they stay there for like a week before they set off. So I was reviewing some old notes I found, and I know they headed east, but they also ended up in the northeast, and this town of Rigdomvale was somewhere along the line, but they also encountered someone in here. So, little scuffed my remaking of the map. I don't have the original, but yeah, we're making do. So, the first thing that they run into when they leave town, and they're traveling through the forests and stuff, heading east towards Rigdon Vale in search of more information about this tower. The mirror wasn't as specific as saying northeast. Just to reel that back, she just said, there's an ancient tower, and if you bring me to it, I'll reward you, it'll free my spirit. So they head to Rigdon Vale, where there's like a mage's college. There's a library, lots of information to be gathered there. And when they arrive, or on their way there, they encountered this barbarian man who's he's in the process of hunting a big stag with golden horns that glow with heavenly light. And he's eating it. So like he's killed it, he's like eating its heart and stuff, kind of grisly, and the party just comes up on this guy. And they're looking at him and they're like, do we leave him alone? Do we just keep going? Do we chat with him? And Millie decides to step up as the voice of the party and starts chatting with the guy. And he's very standoffish. He's like, this is my kill, you leave me alone. He doesn't really give too much of himself besides his name, which is Skaith. So they chat for a while, and Millie almost has him convinced to come with them to Rigdon Vale, when Iris, in her limitless wisdom, decides to throw a fireball at Skaith. So she casts, I think it was like Firebolt or something, and she misses, and he turns to her, and he runs up, because he was on guard. Like, he didn't trust these people, he doesn't know these people, but he was willing to hear them out, and he rushes Iris, and dragon's breath comes out from him. So this is no ordinary barbarian. So he roasts Iris, and out of game, I kind of leaned over to her and was like, hey, so that should have outright killed you. I'm not gonna do that to you, but just remember, your actions do have consequences. You can get into a lot of trouble doing that. And she's like, okay, I'll be good. She was not. But yeah, so she was left unconscious, and Skaith just turns to the group and says, take your friend and get out of here. I want nothing to do with you. And he goes back to doing his thing with the big deer, and they head over to Rigdon Vale. So they eventually arrive at the place, and they find that access to the city is pretty restricted due to the Civil War stuff. So the group start trying to plan out how they're going to get into the town. So Aurora, they split up and kind of like approach it in different angles. So Aurora, she and Iris, they kind of investigate. They find a hole in the wall, and they sneak in that way. While Az and Millie, they find a rowboat to the south that had like crates, and it had black cloaks. And yeah, they just hopped in the boat, they threw the cloaks on, and they quietly rowed in through the port, and then they snuck in near like some sewer entrance. They took one of the crates with them, not knowing what it was. And yeah, so all four find their way into the city, but in separate pairs. Yeah. So what ends up happening from here is they track down a hole in the wall inn where the innkeeper, he's being a jerk and price gouging them and stuff, and nothing really comes of that. Just, it's a kind of scummy situation they're in. So they break off to do different things. So Aurora, she just wants to go shopping. Iris, she heads off to just check out the town, which involves a misadventure where she goes down an alley, she finds a guard, she decides that she's going to attack the guard and steal his uniform. She fails and gets arrested. While doing so, Aurora sees this all go down, and she's calling out to her, and Aurora just kind of waves at her bye-bye, to let her kind of suffer the consequences of her actions. Millie and Az, on the other hand, they're approached by someone else wearing a black cloak, and the guy tells them, "Hey, I saw what you did. Give me all the gold on you, or else I'm gonna expose what you did and get you in a lot of trouble." And they just took the guy's word for it. Turns out that the crate that they had snuck in was a package of alchemical drugs. Think like medieval cocaine. So the guy, he uses that opportunity to swipe all the gold that he could from them, and that was that. Then from there, they make it to the library. They have no money to work with, but kind of like an apprentice librarian there. His name's Taro. He kind of takes pity on them, and he agrees to do the research for free into the mirror, because he's a student. He wants to have a big breakthrough. Maybe what they're looking for could get him famous. So he tracks down information around this mirror, and while they're waiting, they explore the library. They find a book that has an address in it. They decide to go check out the address. Turns out that it's the entryway to like a black market run by the Thieves Guild. So it turns out that they had stolen the black cloaks from the Thieves Guild, and that put a target on their back for just kind of interfering with guild business. And someone approaches them saying like, "Hey, do you want to make some money?" And given that they had just given up all their money to a random black cloak that threatened them, they're like, yeah, we'll make some money. So the guy leads them to these fighting pits where they see a selection of drug addicts fighting another one of those big deers that they saw Skaith eating. And this particular deer is winning its fight. It turns out the horns had psychic powers, and it was like throwing the guys around and crushing them with its mind. And they both look at each other and like, uh-oh, what did we get ourselves into? So they bring the deer back, send Millie and Az into the fighting cage, and they're in like a duel situation where they have to fight a group of these down on their luck people. And it's honestly not fair. It's the people they're fighting are using rusty daggers, and they're all tired and worn down, versus these two who are, I wouldn't call them seasoned adventurers, but they at least have good equipment. So they fight their way through a cluster of addicts that are just fighting to get another fix. Make their money, do not feel very good about it. Before they head out, they go meet up with Taro again. Find out that the magic mirror is linked to a location up in the northeast, and they happily part ways there. They head back to the inn to reconvene with the group. They meet Aurora, who doesn't tell them what happened with Iris, which you have a bit of a meanwhile going on here, where Iris she's in jail, she's shackled up, Using magic and a lot of luck, she kind of worms her way out of her shackles, uses a firebolt to cause a distraction. Chaos breaks out in the little prison and she escapes. She is a regular criminal at this point, which is all fun. I'm just going to take a little drink. Yeah, so from here, we run into when the group leave Rigdomvale and start heading to the tower in the northeast. They find Skaith has been busy. They find other animal carcasses that have been all kind of like ritually consumed. And they arrive in the town, and it's like a little outpost town. So they know Skaith is in the area somewhere. And the four of them head up to the area here. And then they gather information about the tower. They find out that people have been trying to figure out how to open it for a long time without any luck. There's actually researchers there right now that are trying to explore it. And they head up into the tower. They start looking around. They go up to the top of the tower and they find this pedestal, and they realize the mirror would actually fit in it. So they put it in there, and it opens up a basement passage. And the researchers slash mercenaries that were checking out the lower part of the tower, they're like, we're going to get down there first and find all the treasure and all the secrets, and we're going to be famous. So they run down there, the party follows them down, and they get there just in time to see a big crystalline golem finishing off the mercenaries. Yeah, so in the basement there's a second mirror, or there's like an altar with a mirror, and the woman within the mirror instructs Az to break the mirror on that altar. So he sneaks around the golem and he brings the mirror to the altar and he smashes it, severely weakening the golem so that the party can actually fight it. But it turns out Iris doesn't want to fight, and she's standing out of the room that the golem's defending, while Aurora, Millie, and Az are struggling with it, until they notice that it has a bit of an affinity for light. So Millie, she casts one of her spells that makes things glow, and uses it on Iris. So Iris is now a glowing beacon, and the golem is attracted to light, it turns out. So it starts chasing her around, and the party manages to whittle the golem down while it's distracted. Iris running around for her life. And... oh, excuse me. Yeah, so when they destroy the golem, the spirit of the woman in the mirror is freed, and she talks to the group about how she is one of the craftsmen of a long forgotten race called the Gore, and she thanks them for freeing her. She was one of their priestesses on top of being one of these craftsmen, and she gives them kind of like the last hope of the Gore, which is she takes the golem and, using magic, refashions it into a sentient golem that introduces himself as the Knower. Now, this was one of my earliest big missteps with running the game. So the fifth player that joined us, he wanted to play a sentient golem. I did not know what to do because I only had the base player's handbook for 3.5, which obviously doesn't have sentient golems in it. I didn't know a lot about D&D in general at the time, so I didn't know the Warforged were a thing. If I were doing this now, I would have just had him play Warforged. But instead, we homebrewed a monstrosity. It was based off of the big golems from the Dwemer caves in Skyrim, the Steam Centurions, and it had similar abilities where it had like a steam cone. I guess you could compare it to a Dragonborn's breath attack nowadays, and it also had a defensive mode where it would use its action to just curl up, and so my mistake was making it invulnerable. It should have just kind of gotten a bonus to damage or something to be defensive, or a bonus when defending. But, mistakes happen. So they got this very, very strong golem that joined their party, and kind of started the subplot of teaching a robot how to love, because he was sentient, but he didn't know anything about the world. So there's a lot of exploration and seeing the world and bringing him around. So the party heads out and they encounter a group of black cloaks, and they'd been hired to relay a message to them. So there's this guy back in Rigdon Vale, his name was Malcolm Benson, and he had a job for them. They took note of the automaton and told the group that he'd make arrangements that they could return to the city, no questions asked, they'd be let through the front gate, and the party agreed that they would go do that. They started looking to find a disguise for the knower to bring him through towns and stuff, because it's a little weird traveling with a golem like that. They didn't want any trouble. He jumped around in his naming. He originally called himself the Keeper, and eventually he came to be known as the Knower. So they passed through a fishing village, and they go through this fishing village. They meet an old man. He gives them a sail that they turn into a cloak for their golem friend. And they make their way back to Rigdon Vale. So Rigdon Vale is very much becoming a key town here. So what ends up happening is they meet with this guy, Lord Benson, who he's hiring them to ambush a capitalist military convoy. Essentially, he supports the rebellion that's going on with the military. He supports the West, but he lives in the East. And the chaos is good for his business. So he's hiring the group to act as mercenaries to disrupt the kingdom's supply chain for their military. They're like, okay, we're just adventurers and we're just getting involved in this. For the money. We're not really worried about the politics. So he treats them, he wines and dines them. He has a puppeteer named Lucian put on a show. But one thing that they note during the show is his puppets are very weirdly well made. Like, they almost look like real humans. So after that, the party mounts up. They head to some ruins that are on the road between Ravenredden and Rigdon Vale. Prepare themselves to ambush this supply depot that's supposed to come through this main road. And they just launch an all-out attack on this military convoy. Their job is to slaughter everything and burn the supplies. Don't leave anyone alive. was the instruction. And they're making quick work of this. Like, they're wiping them out. It's a bloody, harsh battle. And they eventually reach this carriage that is not meant for military use. And when they enter it, they find a woman who identifies herself as Lady Benson. So it turns out Lord Benson is an abusive monster, and he hired the group to attack this military convoy because his wife was traveling with it and he wanted her dead because she is trying to get away from him. And the local commander, like the commander of this convoy, he was approached by her to save her, basically. So he was going to smuggle her out through the convoy. So the party's right pissed at this. And they apologize, and it's kind of difficult to make up for that kind of thing, but they decide to escort her the rest of the way with the military convoy and take her north to a military outpost called Fang Cell. So we have this big group of people. They travel up to Fang Cell. They find out there's another one of those towers there, and they decide that they're going to explore it. Because the knower, he's trying to understand himself and learn about his own identity. So the party, they want to assist him in this, but Iris, she decides that she doesn't want to come with because she likes being difficult when it comes to the party, and she stays behind while the group goes to the tower and explores. And it's, if memory's a little hazy on what they were doing, I think it was like a puzzle that had to do with reflecting light all over the place, and they were on a death timer. But yeah, they more or less successfully deal with the puzzles. They find a sword that can absorb light and then shoot it back out. And they find an upgrade for the knower that kind of opens his mind and makes him more human-like. So it turns out that as they're traveling to these different towers and ruins, they're finding upgrades for the knower, which will make it easier for him to survive in the world and bring him closer to, I guess, what you would call his destiny. That he doesn't actually know what his destiny is. So Iris is back in the town. She's just kind of doing her thing. The commander, he's back in Fang Cell. Lady Benson's safe. And while Iris is in the town and she's just hanging out at the tavern, Skaith comes in. He doesn't notice her, but like he delivers a bunch of meat to the tavern, and then he gets a drink, and then he goes to leave, and Iris follows him. And the two of them kind of form up this chaotic friendship as she won't leave him alone and keeps traveling with him as he's heading to this abandoned military fort known as well, he's not going to the fort, he's going to the mountains above the fort. So what ends up happening is this dynamic duo, Iris agrees to help Skaith with her magic to bombard this military fort. It turns out Skaith is a rebel, or not particularly a rebel specifically, but he's aligned with the rebels. He's the leader of a big band of bandits, and they've been given the job to take this military fort. So what they've done is they've built catapults up in the mountains, and they're gonna drop trees and stuff. And he recruits Iris to light the trees on fire with her magic, and then they'll just like fill the place up with flaming debris and smoke them out, and then with the forces that he has nearby, they would just overtake the fort that way. So that's what they're up to. Aurora, deciding to be Iris's keeper, is she never joins up with them per se, but like she's always in the background watching Iris and Skaith, and she's like part of their group but not. Az decides that he's still very pissed off about the Benson situation. So he heads over to Rigdomvale to confront Lord Benson. He tries to tell them that the contract that they had signed with Benson with wiping out the military convoy had been a failure. He wounded himself a bit before going in there, and that the party was captured and all this. And Benson calls him on his bluff and tells him that he had a member of the Thieves Guild tail them to make sure they did the job and reported back when they didn't. So they have a long discussion, and they come to an agreement to leave things as they are, water under the bridge a bit. And Az had a want to join the Black Cloaks, and he was looking for the invitation or the hookup. So Az had to go on a hunt to try and find a rare item, rare valuable item somewhere out in the world. And they had Millie and the Knower. They decided to head south on the hunt for another set of ruins. Let's see, where were they heading? Yeah, they're heading to a place that was a fair bit off called Heimlos. Now, on their way to this place called Heimlos, an abandoned military fort where there was there are said to be more ruins, they encounter a paladin named Alistair, who he was on the hunt for necromancers in the area. So he asks them, like, hey, have you seen anything? They tell them, like, oh, like, we ran into one near Ravenredden. It was a whole thing. He thanks them for their time, asks if they want to come with them. They're like, no, we're doing our own thing right now. And he's like, fair enough. Well, I'm going to go investigate in that area, see if I can find anything else. So the paladin leaves them to their thing. They travel to Heimlos. And yeah, they explore the ruins of Heimlos, hoping to find answers about the Knower's purpose. And what they end up finding is, with the Knower's presence, a passage to go underneath the ruins opens up. And it turns out that they encounter these two sickly humanoids. Their skin was pale. It was like a ghostly light skin and red eyes. Another thing I borrowed from Skyrim. If you've played it, you'll know of the Falmer. And these guys are very much based off the Falmer, but they're known as the Gore. So this is that ancient race, and they're the last couple survivors of it. And when they meet the Knower and Millie, they go, oh, we need to introduce you to our god. So they lead them into this altar where they meet this big statue of a humanoid in prayer, basically. And it turns out this is one of the Gore gods named Fidel. And I actually have a passage from his where he retells the story of what happened, along with the mission that he gives off to the Knower. So I'll just read it. So fumble about. Long ago, a proud race known as the Gore walked the lands of Galileer. As the dominant race of the country, they were a short race of humanoids with a disposition to having rounded, plump bodies. They were descendants of both gnomes and dwarves, combining both the race's finest traits and craftsmanship. This led the Gore to turn from their gods, and instead they built gigantic golems to worship instead. The tribes were happy, but one day the tribe of Skaith received a mysterious gift. A massive gray stone coated in Gore writing, praising a being not of this world. A couple years after receiving this gift, the Skaith attempted to stomp out all the other tribes, using their golem god as a war machine, crushing tribe after tribe. In order to resist the incoming invasion, Skaha, a priestess of Innis, rallied the remaining tribes to pool their resources and built a being to oppose Skaith. Skaha saw to it that a being named Corvinik, the golem god of life, was built. The two met on the battlefield, but not before Corvinik sealed all Gore villages tightly shut to protect the inhabitants. As the two battled, Corvinik was forced to release all his energy to destroy Skaith and his former ally Maha, who turned on him during the battle, forcing him to destroy everything in his wake. Corvinik's core is the same core that belonged to the golem god from ages past, and it turns out that the Knower's destiny is to take on this core and combine the powers of all these golem gods and restore the Gore to the world. To do so, he has to defeat Fidel in battle, and he's in no position to do so currently. His new task is to travel the world and grow stronger so he can defeat Fidel. Yeah, so I guess it wasn't actually dialogue that was written here. So I'm going to say whoops on that, but that kind of laid everything out. So we had 8 golem gods in the past, and 8 Gore tribes that worshipped golems that they built. And one tribe tried to wipe everyone else out. So they built up the golem god Corvinik, who took the combined powers of other golem gods, and they had a big cataclysmic battle on the surface, wiped everything out, and the only golem god that survived was Fidel. But because Corvinik had sealed all the villages, everyone kind of wasted away, and that was the end of the Gore, which, side note, was also how the humans were freed from their oppression the first time, and they were able to return to the surface because they weren't living in those villages. They were farm hands on the surface that would provide food for those that lived underground. Yeah, so those two, they kind of deal with that, and they're like, all right, let's head over to Ravenred and see if we can meet back up with everyone. And at the same time, as he undergoes a trial with the Black Cloaks, he obtained his rare and valuable item, trades it in. He meets with a guy named Otto, who he takes a liking to Az because he misunderstands why a cleric is joining the Thieves Guild. He thinks it's some form of like religious rebellion or something. He's super into it, so he's got a soft spot for Az. As his trial is more of a really gross initiation where he had to kill a man in a basement without being noticed. It was a guy who hadn't paid his debts to the guild, and they captured him for whatever weird purposes. He could have gone to the fighting pits, but instead he was used for this trial. So Az does the duty and gains membership to the Thieves Guild, and Otto's blessing to go out into the world and do his thing. And the only rule for him is he has to provide X amount of gold to the guild to maintain his membership. And however he gets it is up to him. Yeah, so Az returns to Ravenredden after that. Skaith, he decides that he and his men, they're gonna rally back and head back home. And plan their next move. And Aurora and Iris, they meet back up with the party in Ravenredden as well. Now, while they were gone, Ravenredden ended up getting ravaged by a little bit of chaos. A necromancer came back through again. This time, there weren't enough adventurers on hand to defend against the attack. And the town got more or less razed. And when they arrive, there's these strange puppet-like beings that are guarding the town. So they fight their way in. They start trying to explore the village, and they track down a guy to the basement of the longhouse where the village elder lived. And it turns out that Lucian, that man who was doing the puppet show for them before, he maintains he's not a necromancer, but he uses human bodies that he performed taxidermy on to create puppets for his shows. Alistair views this as necromancy. And so the two of them were fighting, and it was only when Lucian was pressed into a corner by Alistair that things got out of hand in the village. The village had already suffered its losses, but the two of them had been fighting in the basement of this longhouse, and Lucian had the upper hand. He used his puppet magic to take control of Alistair, and he was about to finish him off when the party arrived. So the group, they band together with Alistair and they fight Lucian. They beat him, they arrest him. Alistair is like, okay, I'm going to take him back to my headquarters and we're going to try him for necromancy, and justice will reign. And the party's like, okay, that's very cool. Well, our village, the place where we had a home, got burned down, and that sucks. So we're just going to keep exploring the world and try and upgrade the knower and find the rest of this power that he's looking for. And that's where things start kind of getting a little wild. So when they come out from the town, they find that there's this great big gray obelisk that's covered in carvings in the Gori language, has sprouted out from the ground. And clinging to this thing was a rather large demon. Picture a gorilla crossed with a boar's head and a rhino's legs, and you'll get the rough idea. It's covered in jet black fur, glowing red eyes. These things I named the Muskelmen, which in Danish is roughly translated to dark brutes. So the party fights this thing. It's very strong. In the chaos, Lucian runs away. He manages to steal a horse while Alistair and the group are fighting the Muskelman. But during their scuffle with Lucian... Oh, I missed a part. I guess that's the problem with going scriptless. Lucian revealed where he had knowledge of where the head of the necromancer group was, so he gave that information away as an attempt to get them to take mercy on him. So after they deal with this Muskelmond, the paladin's like, okay, we know where the necromancer is, like we know where the head of their cult is, we're gonna get down there, we're gonna take him out. So Lucian's gone to God knows where, and the rest of the group, they head south to Afdale, where they run back into Skaith. And they meet up with him. They talk to him. They find out that after they used him to take that military fort, the rebels, they kind of cut ties with him. And he's a little down. He's a little pissed because he is fighting to try and get a better place for his people. The bandits kind of stem from a group of just down on their luck people from the south, and they elected Skaith as their leader due to how strong he is. They thought that he would make the difference for them. So the group, they meet up with a lady with access to a boat. They convince Skaith to actually come with them. The Knower and Skaith have a duel where basically the Knower turtle shelled. It was one of those kinds of matches where the unstoppable force meets the immovable object, and Skaith just kind of got tired. Like, he didn't lose the duel, but he got bored of attacking this thing that was turtling. He just said, this is stupid, I'll just come with you guys. So he joins up with the party, and they all pile into a big ship, and they head south to a tropical island known as Fairy Island. So they get in there, they track down some ruins, they explore these ruins, they find all kinds of undead, they find demons, they find cultists, they find necromancers, they fight their way to the inner sanctum, and at the end they encounter this heavily robed man named the Grand Necromancer, and he's been piling up all this magical energy. He's got a ritual on the go, and the party's like, we're here to stop you. Alistair rushes him. Skaith stays outside. He's guarding the boat, and making sure that their way home isn't taken from them. So the six of them, they go in there, guns blazing. They fight their way through. The Necromancer, he's throwing fireballs left and right. The party's in pretty dangerous spot, but they overcome the Necromancer. And Alistair, he walks up the stage where the ritual is being conducted, and he's checking things out when these bloody chains come out, and they grab him and they drag him into this pool of liquid that the guy was on about. And in a flash of light, a big crystal just gets launched out of Alistair's body, and the body gets sucked down into the murk. And replacing what comes out is kind of like a Dark Knight looking guy, a paladin of sorts, or a Dark Knight. A big suit of armor, and he's basically taken Alistair's body for his own. So we get the villainous dialogue. Menhir is the being's name. He required a paladin's soul to become his vessel, or a paladin's body to be his vessel. And Menhir's soul entering the paladin's body forced the paladin's body out, and it crystallized into a resurrection stone, basically. So the party holds on to this resurrection stone in case something terrible happens. And they're like, okay, we're gonna fight Menhir. We're gonna, we don't know this guy. We're gonna put him down. We're gonna defend our land. And Menhir kind of just snaps his finger, sends out this wave of necromantic energy that paralyzes the entire group. And he just kind of smirks, and he's like, ha, you guys aren't worth my time. And he teleports away. So after many hours, Skaith is like, okay, I'm a little bit worried about them. I'm going to go in there. He retrieves their bodies, gets them on the boat. They head off to another island that's populated. Um, they get taken care of. Men here, no one knows where Men here ran off to. And that was where, like, the first, if you were to think of it as a TV show, that was the end of the first season of our campaign. It was the end of the school year. This was all university students. We were all studying and doing this on the side. Like I said, the plot was a bit of a cluster, but it was my first time running a game. Yeah, so we all went home for the summer, and this was the time that the party was spending recovering from the paralysis from Men here. He had done what I called domination magic, where the first time someone experiences the domination magic, they can't even stand in front of this guy. Their bodies just seize up, and it stays that way for a month, and someone has to take care of you, or otherwise you'll just waste away. So Men here does this to them. He's like, these are small fry. I'm going to go and cause as much chaos and damage to the world as possible. And he takes off. So when we start back up, the party has been resting on a tropical island. They've been getting taken care of by locals. Skaith has been traveling to and from the island, making sure that they're okay, while also being consulted by the rebels and the capital army. So the three of them have decided that civil war is on hold. And Skaith has been put in charge of kind of like special operations with the party. Because what they've discovered is those that have experienced domination magic once and lived are no longer affected by it. So the party, they've ended up becoming key pieces to keep alive in this game, because they're the only ones that can actually fight Men here safely. So they start doing these military missions based out of Kyrd. The party eventually rejoins them over here in the Bridge Fortress area. Their first mission brings them to the border and to the south, where they suffered heavy losses due to some scouts. They found some ruins, and in the swampland it was a whole thing. And what they end up encountering there is there's this frog that had become corrupted by Men here's magic, and it turned into this big giant lumbering beast, and it's a danger for it to be there, and it uses domination magic to hunt. So the party, that's actually one of my favorite bosses I ever designed for the campaign. It rapidly regenerated HP, but so you could outrace its health, but if you got swallowed by it, you could attack it had a crystal inside it, and if you broke the crystal, the regeneration would stop. And that's what the party ended up figuring out. So a couple of them got swallowed by the frog, and while they were in there, they found the crystal. They broke the crystal, and the frog started dying. And in response to this, it tried to bury itself in the swamp to take them with them. So the party had to like fight their way out of the carcass of the frog before it managed to get into the swamp's murky waters. It was a very fun encounter. I wish I had more details about it, but yeah, actually, now that I think about it, it's something to revisit for the future, maybe. Yeah, so the party starts doing all these odd jobs. They pass through a village a few times where they meet like a kid who has this dog, and then like just like locals of the area. So they meet him leaving. They meet him coming back. And then they hear that the kid's gone missing. I had a really bad habit of, I call it shock jocking, where basically you put your players in shocking situations to make it more memorable. But the way I thought they would handle a situation was not how they handled the situation. So it turned out the kid's dog died, and the kid was really upset. And it also turned out Menhir, he had the ability. Basically, Menhir's the father of necromancy in this world. He contacts people that are desperate and gives them what they need to overcome what's making them desperate. The biggest case which gave birth to necromancy was a king whose daughter died long ago, and in his desperation he accepted Menhir being allowed to possess his body in return for allowing his daughter to walk again. Which is poor wording, because she came back as a zombie, and Menhir got to become this king for a period of time until he was overthrown. And sects of people that learned this magical art that was run by the king, or created by the king, went on to become the necromancers. So Menhir, he contacts this kid and basically puts the party in a situation where you have a Menhir possessed child he's casting spells, like he's throwing fireballs at the party, and very dangerous, guarded by this big hellhound. And the party, they killed it. It's a fight, like they have to fight off this kid, and so they engage with the battle, like they engage with the kid, they're fighting, they kill the hellhound. So it's just the child, and my hope was Az would perform an exorcism. He's a cleric, he has godly powers, it's clearly a possession, so I was hoping he would try and do something like that. But no, they killed the kid. Which, whoops. They, yeah, so they ended up killing the kid, and they were very gutted by having to do that. So at least the party was emotionally impacted and invested in this, but yeah, we talked about it after. I was like, yeah, you guys had a way to save him. And they're like, are you kidding me? And yeah, it was a whole thing. They weren't amused for me putting them through that, but they also really enjoyed it as a story beat. So no harm, no foul. But sometimes maybe shock jocking's not the best. But yeah, so they dealt with that situation. There's a few other minor instances that they ran into, where in one spot they ran into another adventuring party and they took down a giant Muskelman together. It turned out that central point in Ravenredden wasn't the only place where Spire came up. It actually came up all across the country, and different groups had to deal with it in different ways. And now you had the combined military forces trying to keep all these demons and necromancers and zombies and all kinds of horrors running rampant across the country in check, and the parties traveling from area to area, destroying the spires and the sources of the problem. One such source they found out was Lucian. So after his escape in Ravenredden, Lucian was contacted by Menhir and given more or less free reign of using domination magic, which he had used on a Muskelmond, or he used his puppet magic to take control of a Muskelmond. Menhir contacted him and was like, hey, I'm going to give you ultimate power if you work for me. And he's like, okay, I'm in. Everything's going to be my puppet from here on out. They just don't understand my brilliance. So he actually took all of Fangcell captive, this military town, in the confusion, using the Muskelmond and necromancers and such. And he took them all prisoner and headed up to that abandoned military fort that Skaith had wiped out before, Drenaven, and set up camp there. So Lucian was one of like the high profile targets. Their intelligence, as like the war continued on, they figured out where Menhir was, and he had set up camp in the military city of Frosnatron. But first the party wanted to take out one of his key allies. So you get another dungeon dive full of traps, necromancers, or no, not necromancers, puppets, flesh golems, lots of like bottom feeding demons and stuff. So they fight the way through this house of horrors where they're finding Lucian was basically using the townsfolk as lab rats. Now that he was no longer operating under, as twisted as it was, a moral code. He was doing live body experimentation and gutting people and stuffing them full of straw and seeing what would happen. Like, he was just unhinged mad scientist mode. So the group, they fight their way through. They managed to save a few people, who admittedly might have been better off not surviving based on what had happened to them. But again, my bad habit of shock jocking to try and build tension. It works. It's just at what cost? So they fight Lucian. They have an all-out battle with him, where he's controlling his Muskelmond. He takes control of the party and that makes them fight each other. All kinds of stuff. Very cool fight. And at the end of it, he decides that he's not going to work for Menhir anymore. And Menhir goes, "Oh, you're reneging on our deal? Well, just remember that you're my puppet." And you just see these kind of like energy chains come down from the dark of the ceiling, and they latch onto Lucian's limbs and they tear him apart. And he apologizes for what he'd done and tells them how much he regrets his choices in the last few years of between his puppeteering and stuff. Kind of like an end of life realization of how terrible he really was. And then Menhir, after he rips Lucian apart, you just hear his disembodied voice echo through, just saying, "You guys, you all better hurry up, because I'm preparing something special for you." So the party, they decide to continue kind of gathering themselves to prepare for the showdown with Menhir. And they know there's one last key thing for them to do for the knower, and that is face down Fidel. So Skaith joins back up with the party as things are escalating, and they might need a hand with this trial that's coming up. And they go down to Heimlos, and they travel down into the ruins beneath the city. They find that the Gore are slowly starting to come back and prosper again now that they have access to the surface world. And Skaith loses it. He flies into a rage at the sight of them, and he's like, Do you guys know what these are? Do you know what they did? And he lays out the I guess there is a history passed down in Skaith's tribe, because he was not from the country. And I'm just realized I never gave the name of the country. This was the land of Galilee, was what I named it. So Skaith realizes that these beings that the party is assisting were these great oppressors of humanity that nearly brought about the end of the world with their sciences and foolishness. And he tells them, like, I thought they were all gone, and that's what the legend said, but if they're here, it means they're a danger to the world, and I need to kill them now. And nothing you guys tell me will stop me from doing this. And the party's like, well, we're not going to let you do that, because these ones are pretty good. Like, we're getting along fine with these. Like, this group of people, it's not all the same. They're not just demons or something. And they're not demons, devils, monsters. They're beings of where there's good and bad, the same as like everything else. So they have this problem where they can let Skaith run rampant through the city, which the knower is super against for obvious reasons. It's his people that he would go on to restore. Or kill Skaith. And they don't quite kill Skaith, but they have an all-out battle with him before they go on to fight Fidel. So the fight with Skaith, it's a really intense one where he's going all out. And this is where I'm going to gush about him, because he's probably one of my favorite NPCs I've ever designed. So he's a barbarian mixed with a blue mage before I really understood what a blue mage was. So he comes from a tribe of people that they would eat magical beasts and normal beasts for that matter, and through rituals and customs they would absorb the traits of the monsters they ate. He hailed from like a northern island in like an Arctic region, so they ate a lot of like blubbery creatures, and their bodies took on the resistance to cold. And Skaith applied this ritual to all kinds of different monsters, so like dragons and magical deer, magical boars, everything. And he had this great deal of magic under his belt. And he was using it all as he fought the party. And as they pushed him to his limit, he revealed that he could actually take on their traits, not just their powers. And he turned himself into something of a half-man or a humanoid chimera made of all these different monsters he'd consumed. And the party defeats him as he's about to kind of like nuke the area with his power. Very anime style. And he falls to the ground and he's like, okay, you guys win. I won't get in your way. Do what you need to do. Just leave me here, kind of thing. Because he is too exhausted to even move. And the party's like, okay, well, we're going to go meet with Fidel then. And they go down into the basement. They challenge Fidel. He brings them to kind of like a dream realm kind of thing, where they do battle. And this is another really cool fight that I ran with the party that I really love and want to revisit at some point. But it was a circular arena, and Fidel was in the middle of it. And there is about 4 rows of squares the whole way around the arena. And what Fidel did was he summoned orbs that circled the arena. Every time an action was taken, they would shift. And it didn't matter what was going on. Like, any action by the players would cause every orb on the thing to shift in a clockwise pattern. So the party would have to pre-position themselves and then do their action, and then assume that by the time the orbs made it around, they'd be safe. So very, very big brain battle, which they were following for about half of it. But eventually they just started standing in them to just clear them out. Also, I had kind of like an AI system attached to him where he would damage nuke the farthest person from him. Or if anyone was standing too close to him, he would cast Thunder Wave to knock people away from him. And then knock them back into orbs and stuff. So the party had a lot of fun fighting this one. And when they overcame Fidel, he granted... Ooh, that's pixelated. Yeah, when they defeated him, he granted his power to the Knower. The Knower was complete. And he had unlocked this secret ability that he didn't even know how to access, but it was one of those it will come when the time is right kind of deals. Yeah, so the party, they pick Skaith up. They go back to the fort. They're prepared to go fight Menhir. So they march up. They travel through his dungeon. It was supposed to be a multi-part session, or like multi-day adventure going through Froznatron. But as we were students and it was exam time, we had to find a time to finish off the campaign. So unfortunately, we didn't actually do the dungeon. We kind of skipped the filler and got to the fighting. So the party, they fight their way through this dungeon and reach Menhir at the end of it. And boy, oh boy, did they bully the hell out of this guy. It's probably one of the most hilarious final boss situations that I've seen as a DM. So Menhir lit half the room on fire to like gather them, and then he was going to start blasting them with fireball, basically. So like zone them into a spot and then just start nuking them was the game plan. So what ended up happening was the party shoved him into the fire and then used a spell to create a wall to keep him in it, and they just roasted him like a turkey. So Menhir's body is destroyed, the paladin. The paladin's body is destroyed. Menhir's vessel dies. But that wasn't the end. What ends up happening is Menhir releases all that energy that he has and forms up a giant Muskelmond. Like, this thing towers over the city. And it's like a war scene. I don't know if you've played through like Breath of the Wild or something, or any games where you fight like a big version of Ganon from the Zelda series. But it was a lot like that, where you had the main party, you had military detachments that were honestly there for flavor, but they were around. Another adventuring party, that one from before that they met, was present, Skaith. They're all there fighting this big bastard. And they kill him. And it opens up a portal to another world. And only the party is able to enter this portal. And due to the intense magical energy coming off it, and they were immune from it because of Menhir's foolish choice to just leave them instead of finish them off before. So they travel through the portal and they find Menhir's true body. So Menhir is actually a demon possessing a tree. And when they encounter him, he's this big gemstone inlaid in a tree trunk that's just shooting necromantic energy off at them. And it becomes a damage race, basically, between the party and Menhir, whoever can kill the other first. It got very tense. It got right down to the wire. And the party destroys the crystal. His essence starts leaking out of it. And to me, that was going to be the end of it. But one of my players, he's like, I want to cast Dispel Magic on it. And I was like, you do it, and you dispel his soul, and he dies. His essence is scattered across this mysterious realm that you're in, and Menhir is no more. And the party returns back to their lives. Menhir's defeated. All the threats are gone. They finally get around to meeting the king after doing all this work for him. And he grants each party member a different thing. So he asks for an island in the south, which he's given, and he opens up a monastery there. Aurora, she asks for her criminal record cleared and a lump sum of gold, and they do that for her. The Knower asks for Heimlos to be recognized as an independent region that he will preside over as the new leader of the Gore, and any people that come to join his little city-state, which he's given. Millie, she didn't really ask for much. She just wanted to keep the Resurrection Stone. And continue her life as a bard traveling around. And then Iris. You may have noticed that there were fewer moments of Iris being a chaotic monster from that point, from Rignam Vale onwards. I guess bombarding that military fort could count, but Iris was on the up and up again. And this is when she decided to do a heel turn. And she asks for the forbidden tomes about necromancy. And the king says, hell no. So she tries to take them by force and gets arrested and imprisoned in the basement of the capital. And that's her reward at the end of the quest. So that is a long and dirty retelling of the first campaign I ever ran. Like I said, we had a great deal of fun. At the end of this, we decided that we were going to keep playing when we went to... we were all in the teaching program at our school, and we opted to keep playing when we got to our new university. And that campaign would take place 2,000 years after this one. It was going to be all steampunky and stuff. I'll talk about it at some point. Because there's a couple of these main players of this tale that make an appearance. So yeah, if you made it this far in, thank you for listening. It's I'm sure it's fun just listening in on people's campaign stories. This one was a wild and fun one. Honestly, kind of disappointed Lord Benson never got what was coming to him. Now that I look back on it, that's a plot thread that probably should have been tied off. Yeah, I guess I'll take a moment to talk about inspirations too, in terms of naming and stuff. So Skyrim was one of the key inspirations, but the 8 golem gods, they were each named for the key bosses of a series called Dot Hack, along with the race, the Gore. That was like the first big RPG I really sunk my teeth into. And I just loved the designs from it so much that I brought them through. And then my time playing Final Fantasy started influencing my Both. Lisping it there. I need a drink of water. Or, I guess I'm drinking pop. There we go. Yeah, playing Final Fantasy, the 14, the MMO, that started influencing my battle design too, where I started ending up with all kinds of weird and interesting mechanics, or set piece battles, because that's kind of how they approach it in the MMO, and it always kind of left me with some inspiration. Yeah, I don't have too much else to talk about. Any art that I used for the tokens in this that weren't from a game, the games that I pulled tokens from, so this is concept art from Skyrim. I think it's from the online version, ESO. Characters with this design, so Menhir, Benson, Taro, I deleted the other tokens. These all come from an MMO called Mabinogi. I played that a lot as a kid. And then pulled Otto from Fire Emblem Awakening. Yeah. And Fidel, he comes from Dot Hack. He's a little fuzzy still. Let me see if I can pull him in here. There he is. There's Fidel. Yeah, so during the boss battle, you see this domey area along the bottom. That was like mounted to the ground, and then he had the ring of the arena for them to fight him on. Yeah, and then the character portraits here, I pulled off Google. I'm gonna post proper references to where I got them. Same for Skaith. Because I have them saved on the side. So yeah, if the art caught your eye, check that out. Always good to give credit to the artists. And yeah, I'd say that's about it for me for now. Thanks for tuning in to my first video here, where I just kind of rambled for an hour and a half about my first campaign. I'll probably do a follow-up where I talk a little more deeply about the lessons I learned about running a campaign and what to do, what not to do. Maybe for your first campaign, you don't make everything by hand and use the resources available. I was just stubborn and didn't realize what was out there because I was kind of learning by myself. So finding a community or a mentor is a good idea too. I guess that's kind of what I'm hoping to create here myself. Well, that's it for me, I think. Again, thanks for tuning in, and hope you guys have a great day. Skål.